Welcome to the 11th section of our course. In this section, we're going to be wrapping up our scenario with the finalization of our requirements. A lot of finalizing requirements in the real world is just emailing people and harassing them until they provide you with their approvals. But there's also the process of presenting your requirements to your stakeholders, and that's going to be the core of what we do in this lecture. So now I'm going to play the business analyst myself, and I'll give you a walkthrough of the requirements document that's attached to this lecture. You'll get a sense of what the proper pace is and how to pause and make sure that everyone is keeping up and so on. Just so you know, the document that we'll be going through is certainly not a very polished or perfect requirements document. There are certainly many missing requirements. So also keep an eye out for what's missing. With that, I think we can begin. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Don Hussey. Thanks for dialing in. I'm going to be stepping through the requirements document for the beverage sales reporting process. And I would first like to make sure that everybody has a copy of it. Does anybody need me to send it to them? All right, great. So why don't we go ahead and get started here? Without further ado, we can just go and turn to page 5 in the document. And here we have a bit of an overview of the project. At a very high level, it has some problems. We have 4 of the big issues listed here in the summary. Essentially, they're as follows. First, it takes way too long to compile all the data into a report that Solomon can use to manage the team. So that's the biggest problem, and it's problem number 1. Second problem is that there's a lot of manual work that goes into creating these reports. This is time that could be used focused on revenue generating activity, other things that are more important than working with spreadsheets. We also have a problem with bad data getting into the PSRs. That's a source of a lot of rework and delays, further delays in the final report being ready. And again, just a general problem with these reports getting to the product analyst later than they should. So these are 4 key issues. They are having an impact on how the product is being managed today. We need to fix this so we can enable growth. That's the project at a very high level. We're going to step into a description of how the process works in a moment, but let me just pause there. Solomon, is there anything that I have missed? And Martha, let me open that up to you as well. Anything that you would add? All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Let's turn to page 7 in the document. Here we have both the process as well as a very long laundry list of issues. We're going to step through the process fairly quickly. We broke this up into 4 major sections. The first part is where the product managers prepare their PSRs. Second part is where the product analyst takes that and compiles them into the PLSRs. Then the product analyst sends that PLSR to the product line manager, and then the line manager reviews the document. I'm not going to step through the process in great detail, but I will say, even if you just read through it right now, you can see that there is a lot of manual effort going into these. All the manual effort, it creates errors, inevitably. And that just creates delays and sometimes bad data. That's a problem. We'll not go through the issues with the process. They start on page 7 and continue into page 8. I think it's enough to just say that there are numerous issues and we've got to do something about this. I think we can go ahead and turn to page 9, which has the business requirements. All right, let's go through these business requirements. If you're not familiar with them, essentially business requirements are the criteria for project success. If our solution has it meets these 5 criteria, then it's a successful project. So let's just go through these real quick. The first one, BR1, is that the solution will ensure that the PLSR is available to the product line manager at the beginning of the first day of every month. And that's really the key project driver. That's why we're running this project. Second one is that the solution will significantly reduce all the manual work performed by the product analyst. Although it's not specified here, we're also going to be reducing the amount of manual work performed by the product managers. The next three requirements all deal with on-demand report capabilities the system will need to create. We're going to have an on-demand report for product performance. We're going to have one for that lists all the transactions for a given product manager, and we're going to have a third one which lists all the transactions for a customer over some time range. Let me just reiterate, if our project meets these 5 criteria, we're going to consider it to be a successful project. So it's really important to know now, do we have the 5 right things? Are we missing number 6? Okay, moving on, the next section that we have, you probably noticed that the business requirements are all at a high level. Now we get into the detailed requirements. And, I won't go into detail about the difference between user and functional requirements, but we've got about 20 requirements to go through here. The user requirements all talk about data that's going to be in the report. I'm going to break this up into 3 little sections here. The first one is, 2 sections actually. User requirements 1 through 5 list the high-level summary information. User requirements 6 through 19 talk about information that's in a table below. So the summary information that's going to be part of the product line sales report will be, well, there's going to be a table of data. That's what the first one says. But then we're also going to have a product field, a product code, the product manager name, and the employee ID. That's going to be the high-level summary information. And then we're going to have a table of data, which has a lot more, many more fields. And those are the product code, the product manager employee ID, transaction ID, the book date, the ship date, the customer, the CRM ID, the quantity, the subproduct ID, the currency, the unit price, and the total sale. And of course, each one of those fields is going to be available for each transaction. So let me throw this. Martha, I think every single one of these requirements, they all came from you. Let me ask you, is there anything that I've missed? Or is there anything that I've misstated or captured in the wrong way? Okay, sounds good. Let's move on. We have one more functional requirement that we'll cover quickly. And that's simply that the date submitted, that field in the PLSR, that'll be calculated as the date that the report is generated by the system. And that's essentially to ensure continuity with existing reports today. All right, we have one more final requirement, which is on page 13, and it's a non-functional requirement. And this is just that the report will be available by 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time on the first business day of each month. And that's to be aligned with when Solomon needs it. Solomon, will that meet your needs, or do you have any concerns about that? All right, great. All right, so moving on, page 14 is the page for diagrams and models. We have a process flow and a sub-process flow. These describe the current state for how the process works today. Since I already covered that at the beginning in text, I won't go through this again now. This is a little bit more detail if you're more comfortable with flowcharts than bulleted lists. Beyond that, we have on the final page, we have some what we call special considerations. And this is essentially, there's only one, and it's for the training team. We're going to need to get them up to speed later in the project on how the new system is going to work so that they can come in and train the product team on how to use it. So those are the requirements as they stand today. I would be very, very interested in hearing from the folks on the phone whether or not we're missing anything. What questions or what items do we need to add? Nothing. All right. Well, I guess that means that it's a perfect document. Great. Well, unless there are any last questions, I'll go ahead and close the call. I really appreciate all your time today. This has been very helpful. If you have any questions or anything to add to the requirements, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, so let me now give a critique of my own walkthrough, and this is something I'm pretty sure I've never done before. Okay, so first, what did I do well? Well, I did a good job of making sure everyone's on the same page. I kept asking questions like, hey, did everyone get the document? Does anybody have any questions? Solomon, Martha, anything to add? That kind of thing. Also, I gave a decent summary of the project, highlighting the problems and the solution. I summarized things that were appropriate to summarize. For example, I summarized all the multitude of issues into 4 categories instead of reviewing every single one. I also covered the data requirements at a detailed enough level without overkill. I grouped them into a structure that was helpful to save time. I also did a decent job explaining what the requirement types meant. Overall, in my opinion, it was a fine delivery, but nothing terribly special. Now, what did I do not well? Well, I don't think I seemed very well prepared. It was a pretty choppy delivery, and that's right, it's actually a good idea to do a dry run of the requirements walkthrough first, which I didn't do. There was a good explanation also of what business requirements signified, but I probably spent too much time on it. It really depends on the audience and their familiarity. Also, it would have been really, really helpful if there were a mock-up or some other prototype of the PLSR to help the audience envision what it will look like. And of course, there were a lot of requirements that just weren't gathered for the project. So that kind of leads to the question about missing requirements. What are some of the areas of the requirements document that need to be further fleshed out? Well, very clearly, there are a ton of missing user requirements and functional requirements. We're lacking a lot of detail about the PLSR, and the custom reports are only mentioned without developing them in any real way. That would be an area for Doug to gather more information on and work into the document. There's very little information about the solution overall. It would be helpful for Doug, working with his technology team, to start coming up with details on how the reports will be generated and delivered in the future. We'd want to see a future state process diagram, mock-ups of the new reports, and a lot of other details. There are many other things missing from the document, but I'm going to leave you with one last area just to stress its importance: non-functional requirements. In the document, there's only one, and this is very not good. We would want to see performance requirements, data requirements, quality requirements, many other categories of non-functional requirements. So let's go ahead and move into the scenario conclusion now.